Well, hello there, students, parents, stakeholders. This is Mrs. Sharp, and Mr. Mester and I have talked quite a bit about how to best communicate with people about our grading system that we use in high school chemistry. For most parents and students, this is a pretty new and different way of grading, and so we want to do our best to communicate with you what exactly you will see and how it will affect your students in the chemistry classroom. So we're putting this video out there, and please feel free to talk to us further if we have confused you even more or if you have additional questions. So the first thing I want to do here is show you a little flowchart. And this flowchart kind of talks about what your student will see in our class, starting up at the top here with a pretest. So at the beginning of a unit or a quarter, depending on what we're dealing with here, our students are going to take a pretest over learning targets. So a pretest is something, as you can see, that is not graded, and these learning targets are a series of statements, tasks, things that we want the students to be able to know or do. So for example, one of our learning targets for this very unit is to be able to use molar mass to convert the number of grams of a substance to the number of atoms of a substance. So we see how well the students are doing before any teaching happens at all, and that just gives us an idea of what we're working with. Okay, based on that, if there are some learning targets that the students obviously already know, we can cut those out, but we focus on learning the actual learning targets. So we're going to teach our students how to use molar mass to do those conversions. So we might use things like lectures. We might use things like formative assessments in class. We might use group activities. And as you can see right here, that is worth 1% of your grade. And typically, this is a big change for high schoolers, because in most of their classes, homework can represent anywhere between about 30 to 40% of their grade, which means anything that they're doing in class or taking home, something that would be known as classwork or homework, is representing a really big chunk of their grade. In this class, it's worth only 1% of their grade. Here's why. We believe that these activities should be done as low-risk learning opportunities. So we don't want to send them home with an assignment of, let's say, 30 practice problems, and they get home and they're not really sure what to do, but they give it a good try. And then they come back and they just get blasted in their grade because they didn't know exactly what they were doing. That's discouraging, it's depressing, and that's not, in our opinion, what homework is for. Homework is to see what mistakes you are making so that you can learn from them. And then when you come back to class, you can do things like ask questions and get answers and talk about it. So our homework grade is very minimal, and it takes a very mature student to understand that even though it's only 1% of their grade, it is extremely important as a valuable tool for truly understanding these learning targets or these concepts. So based on that and what we're seeing in class, the students take what we call an assessment, which I have here in parentheses as a quiz, but it's sort of like a way bigger deal than a quiz. So in chemistry, we call these LTAs, learning target assessments, and they can be like a quiz. What I think of them as is a focused test. So it's a test, but it's only over one task or one concept. And it's over that specific learning target. So I'm only going to see how well your student knows how to use molar mass to convert from the number of grams to the number of atoms. And that's it. I'm not going to throw anything else in there. It's not going to be this huge, massive thing. It's just going to be that one thing. That's worth 70% of their grade. Now, you have a lot of learning targets, so it's not like one learning target is the be-all, end-all, but these series, and just so you know, that is about 8 to 12 per unit, okay? So in our first unit, which is atomic theory, we're going to have 8 learning targets. And so each one of those has its own unique system of being graded, so each one's going to be graded separately, and together all of those LTAs represent 70% of their grade. Okay, so this tells us what the student really knows and what they don't know. These LTAs are also given a system of numbering. So for example, every Unit 1 LTA is going to start with 1 dot something. So our very first objective or our first learning target is going to be 1.1. And then it'll go all the way 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. And so we'll be able to look, and you'll be able to look at PowerSchool and see how your student is performing on all of these different learning targets. So for example, you might see that your student begins the semester with a score on their first LTA of a 9 out of 10. All the LTAs are graded out of 10. That's because they're weighted evenly. Each one is worth an equal amount, and it also gives your eyes and your mind a very easy way of seeing what your students know and what they don't know. So if they get a 9 on 1.1, a 10 on 1.2, a 9 on 1.3, and then a 5 on 1.4, we know that they're doing pretty well, it's that they're struggling with this one very specific concept, 1.4. So that's when we can go back, and if we continue to look at this diagram, your student can relearn that 1.4, whatever that may be. Maybe he or she was sick that day. Maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe they forgot to study. Whatever it was, they go back and they figure out what went wrong. Then they have an opportunity to reassess that learning target, just that one. So if 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 are great, they're not retaking that one. They're just retaking 1.4, which is the one they needed to work on. Now that reassessment will replace the old score. Okay, so if he or she turns around and that 5 out of 10 does a little studying or gets some help with a friend or whatever it is, and we get a 9 out of 10, then I take out that 5 completely from the grade book and I replace it with a 9. So I hope you can see what a powerful, powerful tool this reassessment piece can be. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but that is a unique feature of this course that many do not have, and that can be done for any LTA that is taken throughout the quarter. So for first quarter, that is up through early November. Every single one of those LTAs, and I would anticipate us being through at least 2 units, so close to 20 or 24 LTAs there. They can retake any of those. And so a student is fully in charge of his or her own learning. He or she is fully in charge of his or her own grade. Okay. Also, we have labs in this class, which is a unique feature. I consider labs to be also for learning, so they have a relatively low point weight in their grade, so that's 10%. Half of their lab grade is what we call mastery. So that is different ways in each lab of kind of deciding if a student has understood why they're doing the lab, and half is participation. And that is basically seeing if the student has abided by lab safety rules, has taken all of the correct lab procedure steps, is following what he or she is supposed to be doing in lab. So that's 10% of their grade. And then 19% of their grade is a midterm assessment, which is a traditional unit test. This takes a lot of pressure off of students because instead of tests being weighted so heavily as they are in many other classes, this is down to 19% of their grade, so less than 20%. These are not reassessable, as you can see. So labs are not reassessable. Midterm assessments are not reassessable. And those are worth 19% of their grade. And that is to show retention. So if students can come in and retake every single learning target, I want to be able to somehow assess what is sticking with them. So even though it's a lot smaller of a percentage of those learning targets, it still is indicating what they are knowing and what they're able to do and what they're still able to do by the end of the unit or the quarter, as this includes quarter assessments. So quarter exams are included in there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about these reassessments. Here are my rules for reassessment. By the way, all of this information is in the syllabus that your students should have brought home for you to look at and sign, but sometimes that doesn't make as much sense as hearing it explained. So these rules are in there as well. All classwork or homework, so that orange section that you saw, that 1%, any of that correlates with the learning target they're trying to reassess has to be complete and turned in before they can attempt to reassess. So please remember that the reason that I have homework or classwork as a part of this class is to have students practice in a non-threatening, low-risk way. So if they haven't done that, if they haven't taken those opportunities, that is probably a major reason that they have not performed well on the assessment. So I ask that that is complete and turned in first. Only one learning target may be reassessed per day and must be done before or after school. So I want it to be something that the student cares enough about to take their own time to do. These are done by appointment, actually. And we'll get you set up here with a Parent Edmodo account, but I will walk through with the students how they go about. It's filling out a simple form online, requesting an appointment, and typically I'm here at least 2 days before school and 1 day after. I am a coach, so my time is somewhat limited, but I try to plan those out at least a week in advance for students to get those appointments. So he or she should be able to tell you how to go about doing that. The most recent score on a learning target will be entered into the gradebook. I put this in here recently because I was having a lot of students who were getting 7 or 8 out of 10s and then coming in to reassess because they wanted to do better, but they weren't really putting any effort into it outside of filling out the application. So they would come in without studying or looking over their notes or making sure that they understood the concept any better, and they were taking these learning targets and failing abysmally. So in my mind, that means you actually know less than you did the first time. So I started replacing their scores to reflect what they actually know. So if I see that you have learned a lot more and you are up to scoring a 10 out of 10 on that learning target, I take out the old score completely and replace it. If, however, you had an 8 the first time and you're down to a 6, I replace it to reflect what you know. So that's kind of a built-in safeguard. These students need to actually be responsible enough to make sure that they are learning whatever they feel they were weak enough in to take a reassessment. And finally, and this is a part of the application process, the student needs to tell me the learning target they want to reassess. They cannot come to me and say, I'll just retake whichever one's lowest, or will you tell me which one's the lowest? All students have access to PowerSchool on their iPads. You guys have access to PowerSchool. You can see instantly as soon as a score is inputted into that system, and so they need to take responsibility for deciding which learning target and in what order. So I do ask that they do that. So I hope that this clears this up a little bit. This is, I think, a pretty unique, cool system that we have in place. I am a little bit biased, but it does give the students total control over their own learning. And as I say in the syllabus, to us, that's the important thing. There's a lot of emphasis on grades and points in high school. In this class, the emphasis is on what you do and do not know, and your grade should reflect that, in my opinion. So please feel free, if you have any questions about the system throughout the semester, shoot me an email, elena.sharp@westernschools.org. I'm happy to answer those for you or clear those up. And encourage your students. Encourage. Keep up to date on PowerSchool. Identify those weak LTAs that they've taken and take care of them. Figure out what went wrong. Schedule an appointment for a reassessment and take control of your own learning. So thank you so much for listening to this and have a wonderful day.